Spain has finally asked Europe for financial help for its banks. It follows sizable bailouts for Greece, Ireland and Portugal, of course. In fact, the Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, is giving a news conference right now. We'll bring you the details of what he has to say later on and how he's termed this bailout. Well, actually not as a bailout, that's how he's termed it. But as politicians look at how to solve the current crisis, could greater integration be the answer? I'm joined now by the leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP, of course, Nigel Farage, and the former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. Very good morning to you both. I mean, do you both agree, Nigel, do you agree that European integration or Eurozone intervention is the best way forward if they want to keep the euro alive?
I think it's absolute madness. You know, it is the reinforcement of failure. The better thing to do, the braver thing to do, is to recognise that those Mediterranean countries should never have joined the euro in the first place. And that actually, by keeping everything propped up with bailout after bailout, and another one bites the dust we hear this morning with Spain, all we're doing is prolonging the misery. We've got countries here that are now trapped inside an economic prison. Youth unemployment rates over 50%, desperation, large-scale public protest, and unless they get out and devalue and put some stimulus back into those economies, I am fearful for the human cost, let alone the economic cost in those countries. So no, let's break it up in an orderly fashion.
And worth the huge collateral damage in the interim. I mean,
well, that collateral damage,
consequences of things like that.
That damage is going to happen anyway, and all we're doing is making sure that when it does come, it'll be even bigger.
Okay, have done with it, Ken Livingstone. Let those that
not often I agree with Nigel, but that's exactly the right analysis. The euro should have been currencies in economies of a sort of equal strength, like a northern bloc of countries built around Germany, Austria and
the
so
UK.
On. The UK and France could just about have made it in, but none of the Mediterranean countries can. And after the Spain problem solved, it will be on to Italy. And rather than lock Europe into a decade of kids having no chance of work, permanent economic malaise, it would be better to recognise that. I just don't think that they have the courage to do it amongst the politicians, because let's remember, because when they set up the euro, the politicians who did it saw this is a step that will lead to further integration, because if you've got a common currency, you'll eventually have to have a common treasury, a common financial structure. And they saw it as stealth. It was trying to create a United States of Europe by stealth.
But Ken, when you advocated us joining...
It sounds like a UKIP recruit, by the way.
This is interesting. But I mean, you yourself 10 years ago thought Britain should join the euro. Do you now think it's a good thing that we didn't?
Yes, most probably it is, but we would have had to restructure our economy. If we joined the euro away from the dependence on finance, we'd have had to rebalance the economy more towards the sort of modern high-tech industry that Germany's got. But I went right the way through this, warned that, you know, you should actually start with a small core. And once you brought all these countries in, it was doomed to fail when you hit a problem like this.
It's interesting you pushed Livingstone in that direction, Nigel Farage, because obviously you talked then about the whatever survives from the euro, they do need to have closer fiscal and ultimately political integration. And is that the way you would have seen Britain going if they hadn't?
Well, I mean, if you look back at it, the original idea of the European, what was then the common market, was to achieve a United States of Europe. And in the post-war period, the idea that you create a United States of Europe, never again another World War II or that sort of catastrophe, that was a driving force. Young people in Europe today, they most really think World War II is somewhere that do Napoleon or something. It's not a relevant factor for them. It hasn't affected their thinking.
But that would have
been okay. That would have been okay if, in the case of the British, in a referendum back in the 70s, we'd said to people, if you vote yes, you're not just voting for a common market, you're voting for political union. And the problem is, and the anger, I think, in this country and now right across Europe, is they realise that politicians with a big political dream have imposed this upon them.
I voted no because we were being lied to.
Because you talk about the United States of Europe, let's stay with the USA analogy. It works, clearly works, as an economic entity, and it is different states joining together with a currency, different rates of inflation, different rates of unemployment.
See,
I mean,
America,
could the UK work in the United States of Europe?
America only created the dollar after there'd been America for about 100 years.
And a civil war. And a civil war.
It was about the last stage of it. And the simple fact is the world's moved on. I mean, yes, in the 50s and 60s, there's all the excitement about the United States of Europe. I don't think it's possible to achieve it. The separate nations won't give up their identity. We need to recognise this should be a trading bloc. And Britain should be orientating itself not towards further integration into Europe, but to seeing investment from China and India and Brazil.
This is wonderful. I can't believe what's happening here.
You know, since you lost the election, I mean, you know, there's a place where
I agree.
I've been saying this for years.
He is absolutely right. And there's been a lot of talk about George Osborne's piece this morning, you know, where Osborne says that you know, Europe must push on to a full union, which I find astonishing. But we ourselves, he said in the article, must integrate more deeply in the single market, particularly in financial services. And Ken's point's the important one. We've got to refocus Britain towards being part of a global economy and not just focus on Europe.
Just specifically on that, I mean, you know, whether we like it or not, I mean, financial services is still a huge earner. You knew that while you were the Mayor of London, a huge earner, not just for London, but for the whole economy. And this financial transaction tax, they're pushing ahead with that.
We've got, I mean, you've got to have a range of jobs, as Germany has. It's kept its manufacturing, it's modernised it and upgraded it, and it's got a better working class people in Germany to get the chance of a good, secure job with a decent pension. We allowed all of our manufacturing to be wiped out. We need to rebuild and rebalance our economy. We're much more likely to do that, focusing on China and India and Brazil, because whatever happens with the euro, however Europe goes, there's never going to be great dynamic growth coming out of Europe. We should be looking at the areas that for the next century will dominate the world economy.
Ken,
let them come to London.
Which is why we've got to leave the EU, because part of being an EU member means we are forbidden from making our own trade deals across the rest of the world. I've just come back from Switzerland, a little country that trades with Europe freely, but is able to forge her own. So she has a free trade deal with Japan, and we don't, and that must be the way forward for us.
Okay, but we have been discussing the world as you wish it to be, or Europe as you wish it to be, in terms of the breakup of the euro. From Angela Merkel, that's not going to happen. She says it stays together. How does Britain then deal with that situation while that progresses?
Well, in a sense, Nigel might get what he wants by stealth, that we remain part of what is a trading bloc, but the rest of it becomes much more politically integrated, and we just have to live with it.
Okay, a referendum, and we know what you think. Referendum, Ken Livingstone?
I mean, well, a referendum on in or out, that's fine if people want to have it. I don't think you can leave the trading bloc. I just don't think there's any desire in Germany or anywhere else for a United States of Europe anymore.
No, that's the point. Euroscepticism isn't just in Britain, it's right across the whole of the continent now.
Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you all very much indeed. Ken Livingstone, Nigel Farage there, and you're watching Monahan.